I can go ahead and get us rolling if that
Yeah,
works.
that sounds great.
Okay, awesome. Well, hello everyone. I'm Emily. I'm a practice director for Reverb. Um, my specialties, if you will, are kind of in leadership development and coaching. And I'm so excited that I get to host this conversation about menopause in the workplace today. I have Maika joining me, and I'm going to let her do a quick introduction here. But she has a lot of wisdom and expertise to offer to us. So we're so grateful that she's riding along with me. Maika, before I turn it over to you, I'm going to do a lovely thank you to all of our sponsors. Kylie, thanks for flashing up a slide. So Carney, Badley, and Spellman, Parker Smith and Feek, AHT, and our friends at Parker Staffing. Thank you so much for supporting Reverb and our meetup conversations. We greatly appreciate you. So I think if a few folks are here, my screen changed, so I'm gonna have to change it back so I can see folks. But Maika, why don't I hand it over to you to do a quick introduction so we can hear about you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Emily. As Emily said, my name is Maika Manring, and I'm a certified women's hormone health specialist. I'm a precision nutrition level 2 health coach. I'm a human potential coach and also a master bar method instructor. So as you can imagine, I've always been very passionate about health and fitness. I studied exercise science and psychology in college. Right out of college, I was in the fitness industry as an American College of Sports Medicine certified trainer. And then I was like, I'm going to have to support myself in San Francisco. And so I ended up pivoting to a corporate job in finance where I worked on an institutional trading desk. And at that time, I had to be up at 3 a.m. to be at my desk at 4 a.m. And you can imagine that that takes a toll on a person. It was really exciting times, but it was immense stress. So after about 20 years in the Bay Area working in finance, I moved to Seattle to open the first 2 bar studios in Washington State. And I co-owned those for about 12 years until we had to close as a result of the pandemic. So I tell you all that because of the journey and how in hindsight, I really recognize that the stress of a demanding corporate job and of owning a small business for over a decade really takes a toll on hormonal health. And so fast forward to now, I'm on this wild ride of perimenopause myself. And through my coursework at the Institute of Menstrual Health, I've really gained a deep understanding of the importance of hormonal balance, really at every age. So I'm on a mission to open up the conversation really more broadly around women's bodies, our shared experience, and to help women feel their most informed, empowered, and vibrant selves. So ultimately, I feel like when we harness the gifts of our hormones, wherever we are on our menstrual journey, whether we're still menstruating or maybe we've already had our final menstrual period and we've crossed over that bridge into postmenopause, women deserve to feel like their bodies and their jobs are supporting them to the absolute fullest. So conversations like this are really the beginning, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you today.
Yeah, thanks, Maika. And I think one thing that we really wanted to kind of just like underscore, and you'll probably say it so much more eloquently than I would, Micah, but like when we talk about menopause and we're talking about women, we really want to be inclusive too. And anyone who is experiencing a menstrual cycle is included in that category and conversation. So that's really important to us. Um, and I'll share, like, I am not an expert about menopause in any way. And in fact, like sometimes I almost feel like nervous in a way to have this conversation because it's so not something that I feel like we typically talk about in the workplace. But I feel so grateful that Reverb is supportive of us having conversations like this. And the reason that Maika and I got connected is actually because we attended this offering at Microsoft around menopause in the workplace, and we kind of we had one of those like almost magic moments where we walked in and our eyes kind of connected, probably because when you're at like a networking event you're kind of nervous and you're like looking for a friend. And so we just had this connection, and then we were hopping in the buffet line and we just started talking and just had a really nice bond. And I think we both took a lot away from that experience and conversation. And so, really, our goal today is just to do that, to kind of have conversation about a topic that isn't often discussed, but we see people leaning into it a little bit more. And so, if there's anything that I guess you walk away from today with, it's just maybe a little bit more empathy about menopause in the workplace. Maybe you take away a practical tip or two, and maybe you feel empowered to kind of have some version of your own conversation in your workplace or with your colleagues. So, thanks for joining us. Really would love for this to be an interactive conversation. So if at any point anyone has a question or something that you want to add to the conversation, you know, in whatever way you feel comfortable, whether that's just speaking up or dropping in the chat or, you know, messaging us privately, that's totally okay to do. Like most of our meetups, we have some questions that are prepared, so we'll kind of jump into those. But yeah, the floor is open for others to participate and join us. So, Micah, did I miss anything in our tee up?
I was just going to say, kind of to tag along with the spirit of inclusivity, people of different gender identities and expressions also experience menopause. So just to tag on to what you said, this session is for everyone who menstruates or anyone who works with or cares for someone who does. So it's going to hopefully resonate for all of you in some way. And we will be referring to she, woman, and her throughout the session, but we just want to include everyone and welcome everyone to today.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking that to the next level. Okay, so Micah, why is the conversation about menopause in the workplace so applicable, you know, right now? Like, what's important about having this conversation in this moment in time?
Yeah. Well, according to the Menopause Society, by 2025, 1.1 billion women worldwide will be postmenopausal. So it affects just this huge number of women. It affects obviously 51% of the population directly, but it really affects, like I was saying, it affects anyone who's in relationship to someone who goes through menopause. So partners, family members, colleagues, anyone connected to a woman that goes through menopause is affected because we don't go through this in a silo. And so it's something that conversations like this are really helping it bring it out into the open to hopefully provide more support and compassion and more resources for women.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it was pretty interesting to hear some of the statistics about how many people are being impacted at this moment in time. So, I feel like I still have lots of opportunity to be educated about menopause. And so I thought just to kind of, I don't know, like give us all some foundation to operate from for this conversation. You could share a little bit more about like what is menopause? What are the stages? What age does it occur? You know, like what's really happening in a person's body when they're going through menopause.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to just add something to why it's so important to talk about it right now. There's a lot of shifts in the way that women live their lives versus how we lived our lives, say, 100 years ago. So in the early 1900s or so, women's life expectancy was around 59. Menopause would hit at that time around 57. So women would only live about 2 years of their lives in this menopausal experience versus now women work into their 60s and 70s. The average lifespan for a woman is about 82. So there's so much more time spent in menopause and in working and while they're working. So there's also kind of an evolutionary explanation for why we go through menopause. And one of those is this grandmother hypothesis, which poses that at some point in our evolution, there became a time where it became advantageous for women to no longer continue to reproduce, but to shift into providing support for their existing children. So it was actually an evolutionary shift from continuing to reproduce until the end of life to stopping at some point and focusing on family and community. So the belief at that time was that this post-reproductive woman was really valuable to the family and to the community. And so I really want to revitalize and revive that way of thinking about women so that now that women spend almost 40% of their life post-menopause, there can be kind of more of a focus on supporting women at this stage. And now I'll kind of go into, like, I just think that's so important to remember, like, we can shift back to that kind of way of approaching menopause if we choose to.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. So menopause refers to the hormonal changes that a woman goes through, specifically the decline in sex hormones progesterone, and then kind of the erratic and then eventual decline of the sex hormone progesterone, and then control hormones, FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. Those two start to rise. So you'll see kind of this divergence between a variety of hormones, and those changes eventually cause the menstrual cycle to stop altogether. So this was a very interesting fact that Emily was like, what does this mean? So menopause itself, it lasts really one day. So you look, a woman has reached menopause when she hasn't had a period for 12 consecutive months. And it's determined retrospectively, and it is that one day that it's been 12 months since her last period, her final menstrual period, we call it. So anyone who's gone through it or knows anyone who's gone through it knows it doesn't last a day. It can last, the symptoms of menopause and perimenopause can last anywhere between 5 to 12 years, and they vary in difficulty and length of time, and they're very unique. Each person's struggle is very unique. So I can kind of break down the stages and like at what ages the stages usually occur, just to kind of put it all in perspective. So premature menopause happens before the age of 40, and that's very uncommon. It happens in about 1% of women. It's also known as premature ovarian insufficiency. And again, that's quite rare that would happen. Early menopause happens between the age of 40 and 45, and that affects about 5% of women. Then perimenopause happens generally between 40s and early 40s and early 50s. Peri meaning that time around and prior to menopause. And that time is really characterized by about 40 plus symptoms that, like I said, they can vary in intensity depending on the woman. And then menopause, 95% of women experience menopause between the ages of 45 and 55, and that average age is 51. Then post-menopause is after that 12 consecutive months of no period, and it usually happens in the early to mid 50s. For most women, the symptoms that plague you leading up to menopause usually start to subside in post-menopause, leading to just a better quality of life, increased physical and mental ease.
Sometimes when you say all that out loud, I'm just like, oh my gosh, women go through so much and are so strong, and oh my goodness. I'm curious if I'll just like give a moment to let all of that information sink in. And if there's any questions or comments, from the group, feel free to chime in. One thing that's on my mind, Maika, that I realized like we didn't talk about, but maybe this would be helpful to folks, or just for friends, family, and colleague. What do you recommend to people who that do want to get more educated about menopause? Like, are there certain resources that you find yourself like directing people to? What's that are reliably, and science backed and all of that?
Yeah, there's the Menopause Society that posts research and really reliable, very resonant research on the regular. There's so many different doctors to follow. I would probably stay away from TikTok to get any information, and you want to kind of look at somebody's background. I find there's a lot of naturopathic doctors that focus and specialize in menopause support. There's so many doctors, Laura Bryden, Dr. Claire Marie Haver. There's so many. I'm happy if anybody wants to reach out for some specific resources. I'm happy to do that. You just really do have to kind of vet the source, because what's sad is that most obstetricians and gynecologists don't get much menopausal really training in their schooling. So this has to be an adjunct to their learning, and it's changing all the time. All the research is changing around what's healthy and what's supportive, and what the different resources are for menopause hormone therapy, for instance. So I'm happy to share any other resources if anyone wants to reach out to me. There's so many.
Yeah, we can do that. We have, I think Kylie dropped in a link to a page where we're gathering some information sites. So we can create maybe a resource section there, and then we could drop those in. One of my colleagues kind of was echoing just what you were saying, Micah, that a lot of the OGBYNs, don't necessarily have extensive training around helping people in menopause. So they were just curious if you had any other recommendations about potential healthcare providers who can help. And an endocrinologist is someone that this person found a lot of support from.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because the endocrine system really is the system that regulates your whole hormone system from your HPA axis, HPAO axis. So somebody like an endocrinologist is going to be so helpful. And then there are certain naturopaths, really who I found that are a little more on the functional medicine side, that kind of look at the whole person rather than treating one symptom and then another symptom. That's what I find with a lot of my clients is they go to their doctor with, say, like their hair is falling out and their their eyes are very dry, and then they send them to somebody to help those two things, but it's actually a systemic hormonal issue that's occurring that's causing those. So it's really probably a perimenopausal symptom, and potentially menopause hormone therapy would help that, or certain supplements or certain way of eating. So they're just not looking at the whole picture oftentimes. So finding someone who will look at your whole being and give you support is really what I would recommend.
Yeah, love that. Thanks for sharing that thought in the chat, Rebecca.
Mhm.
And we're getting some wonderful book recommendations too. So Kylie, I hope you can grab those for us so that we don't lose them. So one was The New Menopause. And then Menopause Brain is another one that was mentioned. I don't know if you've heard of either of those two.
Yep. Yes, definitely. And
Yeah.
the Hormone Manual Repair by Laura Briden is a really great one too. Gives you so many like tangible things that you can do based on your symptoms. She breaks it down by symptom, and I really love that.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you said there's like 40 plus symptoms that
Oh
people
yeah.
experience. Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, let's jump forward into some of our other questions. Why is our experience of menopause more challenging now?
Kind of touches back on the evolution of women over the last many years, and how many new factors are affecting the intensity of our experience of menopause. And there's a researcher at UW, actually, she's a physician scientist in the women's health department, and she really believes that women's experience today is more challenging than past generations due to environmental, genetic, and societal factors. So to look at, say, things like the higher levels of stress and anxiety that we have. There's a study called the SWAN study that started in 1994, and it followed a wide variety of ethnic and racial. It was a very ethnic and racially diverse sample of women that had not yet reached menopause, and followed them until they're still following them now. And they found that anxiety and stress was one of the real high drivers of a severe menopausal experience. And I mean, if you think about how life is now versus how it was 50 or 100 years ago, the sources of stress, from being a working professional, a parent, potentially a caregiver, the to-do lists that we have, all of the pursuits that we have in life, it's that kind of busy woman syndrome that ends up taking a real toll on your whole hormonal system. So your adrenal glands and your ovaries are tied together by a whole axis. And so when you're under a lot of stress, your stress response system goes into survival mode. And it's like, okay, I'm going to suppress non-essential functions like reproduction and digestion. And over time, that can cause both short and long-term hormonal issues. And when you think about how in your reproductive years, from puberty until 35 or 40, you have a different level of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone really at each day of your cycle. And so those hormones are fluctuating, causing your energy to be different, your nutrient needs to be different, your exercise needs different, how you show up at work is going to be different. So when you honor those fluctuations and live in alignment with your cycle, it helps you to live sustainably. And nobody's really trained us to do that. We've all been just told, this is your body, you live on a 24-hour clock, eat this and sleep like this and exercise like this all the time. But it really should, if we're living in alignment with our hormones, you're changing that week by week. And so after a lifetime of really railroading over those fluctuations, when menopause hits, it's like the mother lode, and it's just going to be physical symptoms, emotional repercussions, and it hits like a ton of bricks. So I really think that the key factors are really like stress, external stress that we all are under at this time of life.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay. Well, I think we've painted a really good picture of why this is challenging and important. So I wanted to get into a few questions just because I know a handful of people on the call, and then there's new faces to me as well, but I know I have colleagues across Reverb. We have some of our, folks that are with clients. So there's a good mix of folks, and I know that they're probably looking for some, practical tips and advice too. So I thought we could just talk maybe a little bit more granularly around understanding what are some of the specific symptoms that menopause causes, and how do those impact, women in the workplace?
Yeah, I wanted to just add one more thing about, why it's so challenging, but actually like kind of a silver lining. Because when I was done talking, I felt like I'm so sad. But actually, menopause can be a really beautiful thing. There's this kind of hormonal veil that comes off at this phase where you're like, I've been giving, I've been accommodating, I've been driving so hard for so long that now you're like, I actually need to focus inwardly. It helps you shine a light on different aspects of your life where so you can see what isn't serving you. So, and there might be behaviors or food or stress, sleep or relationships or tasks that you're doing that just don't serve you anymore. And it can allow you to really focus inward and make change. So
Yeah.
on that note, that's the good aspect of it. In terms of symptoms, I like to think about them as four kind of buckets. It is a full body experience, as you might imagine. One of the four buckets is these vasomotor symptoms, and those are primarily caused by the dysregulation of that internal temperature system that is controlled by your hypothalamus. And so you have hot flashes, night sweats, and as a result, oftentimes disrupted sleep. And then there's the psychological and mental symptoms caused by dropping progesterone, which is your calming hormone. And that is what really affects your mood and your brain function. So you experience fatigue, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, memory lapse, brain fog, irritability, and those mood swings where, you just don't know where anger is coming from or sadness. Next, those are the somatic or physical symptoms that also are a result of shifting hormones, and you've got changes that your body is changing its appearance, functions, and sensations. So you might have headaches or migraines, joint pain, heart palpitations. You might grow facial hair, and then you might be thinning hair from your head. So it's lots of changes that feel inexplicable. Obviously, body changes, weight gain, and then there's a lot of people are surprised to know that like your mouth can have some burning. You might have issues with taste. So those are some of the physical sensations. And then there's the urogenital ones, which are around how your vaginal tissue is estrogen dependent. And when you're losing estrogen, it causes not only like a loss of moisture, but it also causes like weakness in your pelvic floor. So you may have you might have dryness, a decreased libido, urinary incontinence, and then irregular bleeding or heavy bleeding can happen as well. So those are all the joys of the symptoms of perimenopause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes like when we talk about all this, it can feel sort of like intimidating or overwhelming to think about like how do we support, each other and others who are experiencing these changes, particularly in the workplace. Um, so when we were prepping for this call, we were trying to think about like what are actual like really practical, tips or ideas that we can share to support women, through this critical transition. And so what are some of those things that like, particularly in the workplace, we can do to just at least start by showing support?
Yeah, I think that this is where it really counts, the rubber meets the road. So acknowledging first, whether you're a colleague or a manager, that everyone's experience and journey is very unique. Um, I think getting curious, if you see someone struggling, with the caveat that you want to allow the person experiencing the symptoms or showing signs of a hormonal change to lead the way in sharing, just to respect and honor their boundaries and comfort level. From an employer perspective, culture is really important. So normalizing talking about menopause. So talks like these are just the very most important way to show that you support women at all stages of their menstrual life, that they're safe, that they are supported, and they can be valued no matter where they are in that process, and that they're given resources. And that's kind of, we can talk a little bit more about what those resources look like. But I really think it comes down to destigmatizing the topic and raising awareness by creating a real culture of inclusivity.
Yeah. So we did talk a bit about, it can feel, I guess, sometimes like the showing of support, if you will, often falls to kind of like two different parties, sort of like managers or like HR people and culture teams. So they're like who usually kind of take on the responsibility of having these types of conversations or showing support. So for managers specifically, what is some support that they can show to their employees or teams?
Yeah. I guess it would be the manager's role or leadership's role to authorize women, like employee resource groups. So supporting women's ERGs and bringing in menstrual and menopausal expert speakers, doing and endorsing internal workshops or peer support groups would be really, really helpful. I think also reminding your team that there are other resources outside of the organization, like medical support. And this might just be signage. Like if you have questions about menopause, know that there's ways that you can get support. There's lifestyle practices, mindset shifts, that sort of thing. Just like awareness around those kinds of support for menopausal symptoms. But specifically managers, really, it would start, I think, with recruiting and how you recruit and who you recruit. So if you're showing that your efforts around recruitment are to recruit women in this stage of life that have a wide experience, career experience, and so much wisdom and intellectual, property to share, if you're showing that that's a value and hiring people like that, that's going to make your whole organization feel supported in that way. And then if you're recruiting younger people, reiterate that you as a member of our team are valued throughout your whole work cycle. So there's just that culture of support. And then I guess, and that would also kind of fight that stereotype against ageism and gendered ageism, where women later on in their career start to feel less valuable. And the irony is that women at that stage have so much wisdom to share, and they feel there's that disconnect between what they have to bring to the table and how they are seen or how they feel they're seen. So it kind of comes back to changing that stereotype, and that really comes from culture.
Yeah. I'm curious if any others on the call either have, tips for managers or leaders, or if there's things you've seen, at organizations that you've supported or worked at. This is my crowdsourcing opportunity for all of your wonderful wisdom.
And feel free to unmute if you want to share. We'd love to hear it.
You don't have offerings yet, that's okay.
I just wanted to mention that I've never seen in our company at least that they even care about that, like mention that or even any support or anything. Like it's like they need to women needs to deal with it themselves. It's not no one problem. It's not even a problem, you just ignore it.
That's so hard to hear. And hopefully conversations like these can start to become a bit more of the norm, just as a moment of raising awareness and empathy.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah, someone else mentioned in the chat, Micah, that they're turning 50 this year, and someone asked if they had experienced menopause symptoms, and this person felt surprised because no one had asked that before, like not their doctors, mom, friends, just underscoring that this is not something that people talk about. And yeah, just getting some support around that, it's not a conversation that is often had.
So interesting because it's a conversation I have all the time. All my friends come to me with all of their symptoms. And so to me, I'm in this little bubble of talking about hormones nonstop all the time. So it does sadden me so much to hear that and also, you know, I'm invited to be on a call like this. I'm thinking, wow, people are really forward thinking. They're really looking to elevate this population and give us the support that we need. So the reality, I need to hear that reality so that I can do more and do my part and make impact and get, you know, continue to get my voice out there. But I love these talks because I look around and each of you can take what you hear from here and bring it back to your company or someone that you know that is in another organization that might learn something and be in a position to make change. So it's like that commercial. I don't know, I'm really going to date myself, but it's like a hair shampoo commercial where she's like, and I told 2 friends and she told 2 friends and so on and so on. And the box just keeps multiplying. So it's like that, like you take what you hear and you start spreading it and you ask a friend who's in her late 40s if she's experiencing something. And I think that's really where the magic happens when people start having these conversations that need to be had.
Yeah, we're hoping we have just a small little ripple effect. And I saw that you raised your hand. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm new to the group, and I love this topic. I wish I had had this topic or this discussion 15 years ago, but you know, here we are. It would have explained a lot. But I did want to mention that there is an organization now called Medovia that is okay. So you know them. I didn't know if you knew them,
Oh,
but they're
keep going, Anne, because we only know
yeah,
because of
yeah.
the event that we attended. So please share.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So they're certifying companies to be menopause friendly. And I don't know a ton about what that certification is. I think that there's some good inroads in educating organizations about this and, you know, and starting the conversation and, you know, really advancing this idea that a company can be menopause friendly, which I love because there's an awful lot of programmatic, you know, sorts of things around the childbearing years, right? You know, companies are very, you know, very supportive in many cases of that time in a woman's life, but then it kind of just drops off. So I love this idea that companies can be actually striving to be menopause friendly. So I just wanted to make sure you knew about them. A friend of mine is one of the founders, and I'm pretty excited about what they're doing. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, thanks so much for mentioning that. We can make sure that we make a note of them on our resources that they share too. They were part of the event, helped sponsor the event where Micah and I met. Still, so I think we both still have lots more to learn about them, but I so appreciate you making mention of them. I'm kind of bad at multitasking, so I'm just going to check our comments. Another person just mentioned that they're talking about menopause with their friends, but almost no conversation before that. And at work, not much conversation at all, but that could be a good topic for ERGs that support women over 40, families, or for women in general. So yeah, thanks for your contributions. So Micah and I also brainstormed a bit about what we might offer to HR, people and culture leaders and practitioners who maybe want to champion support around menopause in the workplace. So, there was like a couple of suggestions and things that you shared too, Micah. ERGs definitely were one that was shared, but I was hoping that maybe you had shared during our prep this story of your sister. And so I wondered if you would share that again, and then any other practical ideas you have again for HR leaders or practitioners in the people and culture space.
Yeah, my sister is the chief people person at a San Francisco-based real estate investment firm, and she just shared this with me last week, and I was so heartened. So one of their partners pulled their portfolio of companies and found that 14% of them are providing menopause benefits to their employees. And I thought, 14%, that is a move in the right direction. And it's up from 0% 3 years ago. So the way that they got to this is they asked their employees what they wanted to see in terms of policies implemented. And then once you ask the question as an HR professional, well, first you have to get buy-in from leadership. So I'm not saying that that's an easy task, but once you know what your employees are asking for and need for support, then implementing those policies to really reflect what they heard, and that is having an impact on 14% of this group of companies. So I thought that was just very, very good to hear. I think that there is, a financial argument that you could take to your leadership around why this is important. And it kind of stems from the fact that in the US, the women over 50 are the fastest growing workplace demographic, and we make up 30% of the labor force. So that's a huge percentage. And 3 out of 4 women are experiencing menopausal symptoms. And for 1 in 4, those symptoms are so severe that they consider leaving the workplace due to their menopausal symptoms. And on top of that, 1 in 10 will actually leave their job. So menopause costs an estimate like around 1.8 billion in lost productivity due to menopausal symptoms. And when you add in the healthcare costs to that, it increases up to 26 billion. So there's a financial and a business case for why it's so important to implement benefits that can really start to kind of tick the needle on how people feel and feel the resources that they have. And then there's also kind of a social aspect, like doing the right thing. There's social responsibility case. Like there's many women, 70% or so, that don't feel comfortable talking about menopause at work or with their managers. And there's a huge leap in chances of depression in women in menopause. And so if you're supporting your employees in this way, you're going to limit the loss of employees, the kind of you'll increase your retention and just change your culture on just the point of you are valued and you matter.
Yeah. I love that. Just ask employees, what changes do you want to see in our current benefits? Then there's the accountability piece. You actually have to follow through and do something about that then.
Yeah.
I'm curious, from others on the call, if you are willing to share, are there amazing benefits that you've heard about, from other organizations, from your organizations, or that you'd love to see in your own organizations? It would be great to do a little bit of sharing. We had while others maybe are thinking, a comment that EAP providers should package information on menopause, menopausal symptoms, and provide links to community groups or discussion forums as a recourse. So true.
Can I just add on to that? Because I think that there is a growing group right now that is gaining a lot of traction around menopause and spreading the word, and especially on social media. I would say Mary Claire Haver, Dr. Haver, is one of those huge people. I went to see her in person in New York. Great speaker. She's doing a lot of speaking engagements. So I think that there's a lot of traction that's happening right now. But I think there's so many things that are lagging for the average person. A, if you're not on social media, you don't see that information. But B, at the workplace, we provide services as part of, packages to women, like was mentioned before, on all sorts of other parts of our life, but there are none around menopause. And when you have a lot of symptoms and you go to a doctor for individual symptoms, instead of understanding that this is a holistic part of menopause and be treated as a holistic piece instead of individual symptoms, it makes a big difference in treatment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's it. That was just my 2 cents.
Oh my gosh, thanks for weighing in. Yeah, I think about that all the time about how much onus is put on people to kind of like share about everything that they're experiencing and explain it together, because usually we're pretty targeted in how we treat things. Yeah. Anyone else? Any comments? Oh, Andrew's saying that Maven has a great program. Do you want to share anything else about it, Andrew, that you might know?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to remember which vendor it was, so I was trying to look that up. But I know there was a benefit program the other month that was specifically talking about just women's health and kind of, I think fertility has obviously become more in the forefront and well past due, but I think as part of that rising awareness, menopause getting kind of hopefully included more with when it comes to women's health and family planning type of programs and vendors that are out there. I know Maven's got a really nice, it's really from women's health from day one through the full life cycle. So it's a good program.
Yeah, that's really great to know about. Thank you for sharing. Micah, we had kind of collectively crowdsourced some of the most like supportive or creative policies that, well, mostly that you've seen employers offer. So I thought you could just share a few of those. Maybe, I don't know if these really got mentioned yet. So yeah, it'd be great to highlight them.
Yeah, I would say these are a little more on the creative side because what we're talking about kind of generally is policy and culture. And so this is just the tangible thing that organizations can do. And one of them is a symptom of menopause and perimenopause specifically is overstimulation. Like loud noises are very, very undermining of peace and calm, and they cause a lot of anxiety. I personally experienced that. When my teenage bonus kids and everybody is talking loudly, I can't think. So at work specifically, providing quiet spaces to work away from that overstimulation or to rest and recharge. So it's just a quiet space, a physical space, if you do have a physical office, to allow that kind of pulling away from all of the noise, literal noise. So that's one kind of simple thing. And then
can I make a comment on that one too? I was thinking about that, and there are organizations that do have like a quiet space. And I don't know if they make mention that this is available to people who might be experiencing like symptoms of menopause. And I was just thinking, just that little offering of mentioning that is a way to be inclusive.
Yeah, such a good point. Like just opening that up. Yeah, I love that. With the uncertainty of perimenopausal periods, just that irregularity, your cycles can be 20 days long, then they can be 60 days long, then they don't come for 3 months, and then you have one. So just that uncertainty, having access to menstrual products and having a place that you can change clothes or a place to have an extra set of clothes. If you're a uniformed worker, just as something as simple and strategic as having darker uniforms. So if there is some sort of surprise, you're not like completely thrown off by that. This is one I really love. It's access to health app trackers to track and manage symptoms. And there's so many apps out there. This is not a very costly ask for employees. So there's ones like MenoLife, Evernow, Midday. We can put these in the resources as well. Some of them are free, some are paid apps. You manage kind of what's happening with your cycle, how your moods are, track your symptoms. And that's really beneficial for when you go to your doctor and you can say, these are all the things that I'm experiencing. This is when I'm having them. And then they can start kind of putting the puzzle together and give you much better care when you actually have it written down or somehow recorded what you're experiencing. So I think that's a really easy give. And then this one's for physical pain or discomfort in doing your job. If you have a physical job or just if sitting is challenging, having access to occupational health experts or ergonomic equipment so that you can stand, you can walk, you can just be in a better alignment for your own physical kind of positioning. So it's kind of a simple one as well.
Yeah, love all those. I'm curious if anyone else has any other, creative offerings of support that they've heard or seen. hopefully one day everyone on the call will be chiming in with an amazing suggestion. That's my wish.
I have one thing. Sorry, everyone. Thank you so much. This is super interesting. Like meditation, and you might have mentioned it. I'm sorry, I was multitasking, but like that's just a part of that. Like take like the crosstalk and the people talking and loudness is like a huge issue. So like having some, you know, like even just 5 minutes to go do that is really can be really resetting. So yeah, and there's really easy, simple ones you can find too to help, or just go take a walk around the block or something.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for like a clothing company that's really stylish to come up with like multi-wear, you know, because you have hot flashes and you want to take everything off and then you get really cold and you want to, you know, like, so that's like my $1 billion idea. If you could think of some kind of fashion menopause clothing.
I love that, Rebecca. You're so clever. Your comment though about just even like the time or spacing in between things though makes me think about like there's other organizational and cultural norms that you can set too that would support things like that, right? Where, you know, sometimes we hear people like instead of 30-minute meetings, you do 25-minute meetings or whatever it might be to give spacing between things. And it just makes me think about how those norms can support so many different things for so many different people, you know? And so yeah, just having like a moment to catch your breath, to reset, to take care of yourself, like those types of organizational norms help people experiencing all sorts of different things. We really like plowed through all of our pre-prepared questions. So I don't necessarily have anything else on the docket. I will totally open it up to the group. I mean, Maika is a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, and you're so kind and giving with all of your expertise. So I'll just first say thank you to Maika, like while we have everyone here for joining us and having this conversation with us, and to all of you too for participating. And yeah, I open it up to the group for any other comments, questions, suggestions that may be on your minds. We'll hang out for a few more minutes, I think, if anyone wants to stay on and chat with us. Otherwise, Kylie did drop a link for our resource page. We'll make sure to flesh that out a little bit more. I think we have the ability to share that out again as a follow-up to folks, and we can add some of the additional resources and recommendations that we heard together. So thanks everyone.
There was that wonderful chart in the resources that might be helpful to look at. I don't think we touched on it specifically, but I love this chart. It's actually from Dr. Laura Bryden, and it shows what your hormones are doing, specifically estradiol and progesterone during the whole menstrual life cycle. It shows how in childhood they're flat, in puberty those are kind of going all up and down, and then in your regular menstrual reproductive years there's like a nice very even flow to it. And then you can see in perimenopause, if you're looking at this chart, all bets are off. I mean, your hormones are all over the place. Your progesterone is low as it has ever been in your whole reproductive life, and estradiol is just off the charts, and then it drops precipitously. So when I think about my hormones and what they're trying to do, I really like to think about how to support them. And that's probably a whole other talk. If you're still cycling, how you can support your hormones. If you're no longer cycling, there's phase specific things that you can do throughout a 29-day time frame where you're eating differently, you're exercising differently, you're working differently, and you really can kind of support your body in a way that allows your hormones to do the best that they can. So take a look at that chart if you'd like. It is from the Laura Bryden book. And if you have any questions about that, reach out.
Yeah. That's like our next talk, Maika.
Okay, there we go. Teed it up.
Give the overview. All right. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. There's lots of kind comments coming through. So we appreciate you all joining us. And yeah, we'll sit tight here for another 5 minutes or so for anyone that wants to say a more personal hello.